This week I'm reading a story by Dick King-Smith called Titus Rules OK. Chapter 1. In an armchair in the great high-ceilinged drawing room sat a woman surrounded by dogs. Some sat in other chairs, some on the hearthrug, one, the youngest, and not much more than a pup, on the woman's lap. All the dogs were of the same breed. All of them looked up at the door of the room when it was opened by a tallish man with a strong nose and a receding hairline and rather bristly eyebrows, who strode in with a military gait that suggested he might once have been a soldier or perhaps a sailor. At sight of him, the youngest dog jumped off the woman's lap and rushed forward, getting between the man's legs and almost tripping him up. The bristly eyebrows came together in a frown. "Good heavens, Madge," said the man angrily. "Do we have to have these fat little brutes under our feet all the time?" The woman rose to her full height, which was not very great. Unlike her husband, she was plump and had thick grey hair set in neat, permanent waves. Like him, she looked angry. "There would be no problem if you looked where you were going," she said in a high voice. "And I'll thank you not to refer to my dogs as fat little brutes. They are not fat. They simply have short legs, like all corgis." Husband and wife stood glowering at each other in that grumpy way that long-married couples sometimes do. But before anything else could be said, there was a knock on the door, and into the drawing-room came a footman carrying a tray. This he placed upon a table before withdrawing backwards. Once the door was closed, the tallish man said, "You feed 'em too much, Madge. That's the trouble." "That is your opinion, Philip," said the Queen icily, "which I should be glad if you could keep to yourself. Do you want a cup of coffee?" "No, thanks, I fancy something stronger," said the man, and he withdrew frontwards. The Queen poured herself a cup of coffee, and then, taking from the tray a plate of biscuits, proceeded to feed them to the corgis. "Custard creams, my dear," she said, smiling, "your favourites," and she gave an extra one to the youngest corgi. "Not your fault," she said to him. He wasn't looking where he was going. Later, when the Queen had finished her coffee and left the room, the mother of the youngest corgi jumped into her chair, warm from the imprint of the royal bottom, and her son scrambled up beside her. His name was Titus, and like all young creatures, he was curious about everything. It was the first time he had been allowed into the drawing-room of the castle, and also the first time that he had met the Queen's husband. "Mum," he said, "who was that man?" "The Queen's husband," his mother replied. "Philip, she called him," said Titus. "Yes, he's Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh." "Oh," said Titus. "They didn't seem to like each other much." "I think they do," said his mother. "Their barks are worse than their bites." "Oh," said Titus. "Mum, you told me she's called Queen Elizabeth II. "Yes." "What happened to the first?" "Died. A long time ago." "Oh," said Titus. "But, Mum, if her name's Elizabeth, why does Prince Philip call her Madge?" "It's his nickname for her," his mother said. "Short for Majesty." The door of the great drawing-room now opened once again, and in came the footman to collect the tray on which stood the 2 cups and saucers, the coffee-pot, and the plate that had held the biscuits. The footman inspected the tray. 1 cup had been used, he saw, and not the other, and, picking out the coffee-pot, he found that it was still half full. He grinned. "How very much, Mum," he said. "Plenty left for me, but surely you've never scoffed all those custard creams. I could have done with a couple." Then he looked around the room and saw 10 pairs of bright eyes watching him from various chairs or from the rug before the blazing fire. 10 pink tongues licked 10 pairs of lips, and 10 stumps of tails wagged hopefully. "Of course," said the footman. "I should have known. It wasn't her that ate them. It was you greedy little fatties. Treats you better than she treats old Phil or Charlie or the rest of 'em, she does. Pity you don't live out in the Far East. They eat dogs out there. You lot would make a proper banquet." And he picked up the tray. When he had left the room, "Mum," said Titus, "who was that man?" "Just a footman," her mother replied. "Footman," said Titus. "What was wrong with his feet?" "Nothing, dear," said his mother. A footman is one of the servants in the castle. There are lots of them. What's a servant? Someone who looks after you and does whatever he or she is told, fetches and carries, just like that footman brought the tray for the Queen and the Duke. But, Mum, said Titus, why couldn't they fetch their own coffee and biscuits? Oh, goodness me, no, Titus, said his mother. That would never do. The Queen and Prince Philip have to be looked after. They're not expected to work. When you get a little older, you'll realise that Queen Elizabeth is the most important person in the land. No one is more important than she is. At least, no other human being. Titus cocked his ears. If I'm reading you right, Mum, he said, you're saying that there's an animal that's more important than the Queen. Several animals, said his mother. What sort? Pembrokeshire corgis. Us, do you mean? Yes, Titus replied his mother. The Queen, you see, may be responsible for all the welfare, not just of her family, but of all the citizens of the United Kingdom and her realm overseas. But, in her eyes, it is our welfare that is at the top of her priorities and most important to her. She is our servant. Gosh, said Titus, do you mean she'll do whatever we tell her to do? Certainly, said his mother. If I told her to do something, do you think she would? Would she, Mum? If you told her in the right way. How do you mean? Politely. Her Majesty does not like being barked at or yapped at. You'll have noticed that just now, when she dished out the biscuits, we all kept as quiet as mice. Any time you want a biscuit, just go and sit quietly in front of the Queen and gaze up into her eyes with a pleading look. And don't ever be tempted to lift a paw and scratch at her royal legs. A couple of years ago, one of our cousins laddered Her Majesty's stockings. Never seen him since. Where did he go? He was sent to the Tower of London. To be killed? No. He was given to one of the warders. But the family felt the disgrace keenly. The royal family? Asked Titus. No, our family, said his mother. And one other thing, Titus, while I think of it, if ever you're taken short. Taken short? Yes, if you need to, cock your leg or, do your business. There is a proper way of going about it if the Queen is in the room. If it's anyone else, it doesn't matter. But you can yap your head off or scratch at the door. But if it's the Queen, this is the correct form. You walk to the door, no running, mind, just walk, and sit in front of it and give a little whine. No barking, mind. And you look back at Her Majesty, and then she'll hurry to let you out. One thing she does not like, and that's any sort of accident, on the carpet, say against the leg of a chair or anywhere. Our servant she may be, but it's important to treat servants right if you want them to look after you well. Perhaps because his mother had just been talking about it, Titus suddenly felt that he did indeed need to do something very badly. How awful, he thought, if on this, his first time in the great drawing room at Windsor Castle, he should offend their servant at the Queen by doing it not on a chair leg, for he had not yet learnt to cock his own leg, but on the carpet. Her Majesty would never forgive him. Mum, he cried, I need to wee. Titus's mother, whose registered name was Lady Priscilla of Windsor, but who was always called Prissy by Her Majesty, immediately began to bark loudly. Mayday, Mayday, she cried to the other corgis in the room. What's up, Prissy? They all asked. It's not what's up, replied Prissy. It's what will be down unless we hurry. Titus needs to go outside sharpish. Sound the alarm. And at all this, the other dogs, all 8 of them, began to bark at the tops of their voices. Quickly the door of the drawing room was opened, and in came the footman. Titus could see that it was not the same one that had come in before to fetch the tray, for that one had had fair curly hair, whereas this one had straight black hair, and, as well, a strip of black hair between his nose and his mouth. By now Titus was whining in his distress, and the footman, instantly sizing up the situation, picked him up, hurried away down the corridor, opened a side door, and popped the puppy down on the beautifully mown green grass of the lawn outside. Thankfully, Titus squatted down and did an enormous puddle. That's the end for today.